I'm really glad to have you back for Computer Concepts Module 4, Operating System and File Management. This is Part 3B, and in Part 3, we're going to look at right there, the Windows Administrative Tools. So, how do we use these tools to make our system more efficient, keep it maintained well, etc.? Folks, this is just like a car. If we don't do maintenance on it, it's eventually going to fail. So let's take a look at a few things here. First of all, resources. As we look at resources here, I want to take you through the task manager because we can find a lot of the resources here to help us understand what's going on with our computer. For example, in this first screen, what we're seeing is the active applications that I had running when I went ahead and made this video. Background processes. So remember in the previous video, I talked about going into the startup and seeing what's starting up. If you don't need these startup programs to run, these backup processes or even background processes as well as startup applications, go ahead and shut them off. They'll make your computer boot faster, they'll make it shut down faster, etc. So here we're looking at, as you can see, all the different background things. We can go into performance and look at the CPU. So if you notice here, I've got a 4-core i7 CPU with 8 logical processors. So we can see that virtualization is on. We'll talk more about that later. We can look at memory utilization, what disk read write's going on, Ethernet. So as you can see here, I'm connected hardwired, and then vEthernet, which is virtual Ethernet. That's between my VM machines. And then, of course, GPU, graphics processing unit. If you can tell, it's using the onboard. It's not using my video card that I have installed on this laptop. Here we can look at app history, startup, so we can see what's starting up. We can see the impact there of applications as they start up, users that are on, and then just details, what's running, and then services. So these are all the services that applications have started up or that the operating system has started up. So if we don't need a service and we shut it off, well, it's not using resources. So you can see here, like the iSCSI initiator service, I don't have any iSCSI devices, so it is stopped. Windows installer is stopped because I'm not doing anything that requires that service. So let's move on here, administrative tools, so adjusting power settings, as you can see here, just a quick screenshot of the power settings. Now again, most of these, what we're going to is system. So I'm typing system in there, and then I can get to these things like display, like focus, etc. Notice the screen on battery, it's going to turn off and save after 5 minutes. Plugged in, it's going to turn off after 10 minutes. So the screen is going to turn off. Sleep mode, to save battery power. You'll notice I have this higher than normal because I may be doing some processing in my case on battery that I don't want it to go to sleep. So you can set these. Now realize you see today in marketing where they say our computer will run 13 hours on battery. By the way, that's because they're taking the processor down to its absolute minimum. They're not turning on Wi-Fi. They're not using Bluetooth. They're not doing these. It's basically how long can we, quote unquote, use the computer, like having a Word document open for it to last. So you're never really going to get that, 13 hours, as they say, if you're connected to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and you're really utilizing your computer. Now, disk cleanup utility. The disk gets what's called fragmented. Now, I have a solid state drive. If you have a SATA drive, this process I'm about to show you is going to take a lot longer, but it's worth doing because fragmenting means I wrote part of the file over here on the disk and then part of it here on the disk and part down there and part over there. And in order to read that, I got to go to each location. So by defragmenting, it tries to put all the files as close together, if not in a single consecutive space on the drive. Of course, recycle bin and trash. Remember, folks, if you're ever wondering why, hey, I just deleted a bunch of stuff off my computer and it's not gone yet, and I look at the C drive and it's the same darn size, it's probably because you haven't emptied the recycle bin, and we'll look at that. So File utilities for file management, gives you an overview of the size of files. If you just go out to Google and say, file size utility, you can find some really great free ones. Find the one that everybody's using that you can see is reliable and is worthy. So stay away from those ones that look funky. They might come with extra software, if you know what I mean, in the way of spyware, viruses, stuff like that. And then, of course, we can also zip files, making them smaller. So let's take a look here real quick. Let's run this video. And if you notice, I'm going to right-click on my C drive. I'm going to go to Properties. I'm going to bring this window up so you can see it. Now, if you notice, use space on mine is 524 gig, and 424 on this computer I'm using today is the size, so about 1 terabyte. Now, I click on Disk Cleanup. It shows me some immediate things. I'm going to go ahead and do system files as well. See those downloads? I'm going to do system files as well. So by doing system files, it's also going to go scan and see, are there any update files that I can delete? When you do a major update in Windows, it'll create 30 more gigs so that you could go back to the old system. Okay, basically uninstalling. Here you can see all the things I'm going to download. I'm going to hit the delete, and it's going to go ahead and start removing all these items. And Recycle Bin, by the way, was one of them. So notice the 524, that's going to get greatly reduced as I do this process. Now, I've gone ahead and paused the video. If you can see Windows Update Cleanup, that's what I was talking about. It's deleting all the update files it doesn't need. Now, at the end, when that finishes, again, that may take a long time for your computer if you haven't done it in a while. You're then going to want to defrag. Because I have an SSD, we call it optimizing the drive. I'm going to run this. You don't tend to have to run this as much on SSDs, but you'll see that what it does is quickly does it. Bing, bang, boom. It's trimmed the drive, gotten rid of unnecessary things. You'll see this process take a lot longer, by the way, when you're defragmenting a SATA drive. So keep that in mind. Maybe run it as you go to bed, okay? Moving on, administrative tools, so Settings app. Now, what you see down below, if you've ever used Windows, is you see the traditional control panel. Now, in Windows 10, they have the control panel and they have Windows settings. Microsoft is really trying to get you towards the Windows settings. They want you to go use settings. If you notice here, a little hard to see, but there's apps, just like there's programs here. So here, I can delete and uninstall apps and install optional apps such as the Hyper-V software on Windows 10 Pro. It's automatically installed. We just need to initiate it. If you're not going to use it, Windows isn't going to install it. Okay? So look for this. Start using settings. That's where they want you to go. If you notice here, user accounts and family accounts here. These are screenshots from my computer. So both of these are actually on my computer. And in the next rendition of Windows, I'm sure we're going to see just settings. They give you time to get used to it. Now, if you don't know what a menu is, dialog box, optional radio buttons, go ahead and pause, read those real quick so that you have a complete understanding of the material. Now, finally, what I want to show you is virtualization. Now, we've talked a lot about it in this video series, but I want to put it to work. I want to give you an example of virtualization. So I created this video. Now, a virtual machine enables a computer or device to run another operating system. Now, I already told you that in Microsoft, they have a virtualization software, okay, that is called Hyper-V. And by the way, you can find free virtualization software like VBox, or you can get VMware, which is a company that specializes in just virtualization. So what I've done here is I've remoted into a computer using a VPN, which we'll talk about in the future. You can see here, it's a little hard to see, but we're going to go out to Eric's supercomputer and we're going to take a look at my server. So I'm remoting into this server using what's called a remote desktop manager tool that I use. Okay, and we're going to remote in. So as you can see, there's Eric's super server. Sorry that this is a little blurry. It was difficult to make the video. I'm going to log into that server remotely. I'm not actually on the server making this video. I'm doing it remotely using this remote desktop. So we're going to fire up the server. What you'll quickly notice is this is a server. Notice it looks like Windows 10, but indeed, just to show you what I'm talking about, This is a server. There it is right there. It's actually running the current version of Windows Server 2019 Data Center Edition. Okay, this is a huge server. It's got two 12-core processors in it. It rocks. I'm going to come up here to Tools. I'm going to open up the Hyper-V software, okay, system software. And we're going to look at the virtual machines. So what you see here is a whole list of virtual machines. Now, not all of them are running right now. But at one point, all of those Windows 10 machines were running, and students were actually logging in and utilizing a version of Windows 10 remotely using a virtual private network connection. So in my Windows Server class, they were doing work on those and demonstrating that they knew how to operate a Windows 10 operating system. So that's about that. Finally, let's talk about user accounts. Folks, I cannot stress enough that most people, when they fire up or buy a new computer, the first default account that gets loaded is an administrator. This is someone, as you can see here, this is very seldom do I use red in PowerPoint. So when I'm using red, it means something. So listen up, stop petting the dog, let me get your focus just for a second. As an administrator, you have full access. And what this means is I'm not going to ask you if you're an administrator if you want to install a program. So if you accidentally clicked on that executable and it was a virus or it was ransomware, bing, bang, boom, it's going to get installed. Now, the reason I bring this up is I never, ever, ever run my computer daily as an administrator. Okay? What I mean by that, and Mac does a good job, by the way, with this, where when you install, it asks you for your username and password, making sure you really understand, hey, you're about to do something you may not want to do that may risk your system. Here in Windows, if we're an administrator, doesn't ask. Even if I was an administrator, I don't want to run my computer every day as an administrator. I want to run it as a standard user. That limits my permission for what I can do to the operating system, thus not able to install programs, for example. If you have kids in the house, make them a standard user. Make yourself a standard user. Everything I do with the standard user. Now, if I need to run a program as administrator, I can right-click, I can say run as administrator, and I can authenticate as an administrator account on the computer so that I don't have to go back and forth from my standard user to an administrator to get some things done. Folks, that's it for part 3B. We're going to look at part 4, the last part, managing files and folders. We'll look at a little bit more in detail at compression, how we make files smaller so that we can email them, for example. Saving, we'll look at file names, etc. If you're familiar with this, great. I still encourage you to take a good look just so you get the material. Take care.